Hello everyone, my name is Chelsea McCallum and I am an accredited practicing dietitian and nutritionist, and today I'm very excited to be presenting for the virtual FODMAP show hosted by Free From and Allergy. So before I dig in, I did want to say a massive thank you to the team at Free From and Allergy for having me as part of their virtual show. Today I'm excited to be talking about the low FODMAP diet and specifically how you can modify your favorite recipes to make them low FODMAP and IBS friendly. Now, when following the low FODMAP diet, we need to limit some flavor boosting ingredients like onion and garlic. However, we don't need to sacrifice on flavor, and I'm going to show you how. Now, for those that don't know me so well, my name is Chelsea McCallum, and like I said, I'm an accredited practicing dietitian with a special area of interest of IBS and the low FODMAP diet, and I help individuals struggling with debilitating gut issues to find relief from their symptoms and gain clarity around their personal triggers so that they can live comfortably and enjoy life. I run a completely virtual clinic helping clients from Australia all the way to the United States of America with IBS, IBD, celiac disease, and GERD. What I'll be covering today is what is the low FODMAP diet, high and low FODMAP ingredients to be aware of, how you can modify savoury as well as sweet recipes, and how to manage cooking for friends and family on the low FODMAP diet, and very importantly, how you can add flavour to your low FODMAP meals as well. Before we go any further, let's take a step back and actually look at what the low FODMAP diet is. Now, although it's a diet, it's not something that we use for weight loss, and actually it's a short-term protocol. And what it does is it helps an individual to manage their symptoms of IBS and to actually pinpoint their personal gut triggers. There are 3 phases of the diet: the elimination phase, which on average lasts 2 to 6 weeks, the reintroduction phase, which could go anywhere from 10 to 12 weeks, and then there's the personalization phase, which is what you follow long term. The diet is designed to limit highly fermentable carbohydrates, which cause bloating, wind, distension, and a change in bowel habits. And some really high FODMAP foods include things like onion, garlic, asparagus, honey, and dried fruit. And what I think is also important to note is that FODMAP is an acronym, and for good reason. FODMAP stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. So now you understand why it's an acronym. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when following the low FODMAP diet, we need to limit our intake of some highly fermentable foods. And when it comes to baking and cooking, there are a few ingredients that we really need to replace altogether, and that'll really off limits during the elimination phase and reintroduction phases of the diet. The first step of modifying your favorite recipes to make them low FODMAP is to familiarize yourself with the high FODMAP ingredients. So when we're looking at baking, this might be our regular wheat flour, our honey, our dried fruits, fruit juice, and large portions of chocolate. And when it comes to our cooking, things like onion and garlic, and especially the powders of onion and garlic, leeks, wheat, whether it come in the form of bread, pasta, couscous, or flour. Our high FODMAP veggies, things like mushroom, cauliflower, asparagus, snow peas, sugar snap peas, and broccolini. And I could sit here all day talking about some high FODMAP ingredients. There are just a handful of the most common ones, but my key tip really is to download the Monash University FODMAP app to identify high FODMAP ingredients that you might reach out for regularly, or that are in some recipes that you love to prepare for your friends and family. The next step is to familiarize yourself with low FODMAP ingredients and the alternatives that you can be using. When it comes to baking, things like our sugar, maple syrup, and rice malt syrup are great alternatives to honey. Our oils, butter, margarine are all low FODMAP. We can still use small portions of chocolate, and we can be using things like eggs, vanilla extract, and leavening agents. When it comes to cooking, our low FODMAP ingredients would be garlic and onion infused olive oils, chives and the green part of spring onions or leeks, gluten-free pastas and quinoa, low FODMAP and FODMAP-free veggies, including things like carrots, red capsicums or bell peppers, Japanese pumpkin or kabocha squash, tomatoes, cucumbers, lettuce, and kale. So why don't we practice modifying a savoury recipe, starting off with this high FODMAP beef stir fry. The first step is to go through the ingredients list and identify the high FODMAP ingredients. I'll give you a moment to look for those high FODMAP ingredients and pause the video if you need some extra time. After scanning this high FODMAP beef stir fry recipe, you might have picked up on some high FODMAP ingredients, including the garlic, the honey, the udon noodles, snow peas, cauliflower florets, and shallots. Now, this recipe has a combination of extremely high FODMAP ingredients, which are almost completely off limits during the elimination and reintroduction phase of the diet. And it also contains some ingredients which can be consumed in small portions as well. So to modify this recipe to make it FODMAP friendly, you might swap the garlic for a garlic-infused olive oil. You could swap the honey for maple syrup. Swap your wheat-based udon noodles for rice noodles, and add some FODMAP-free vegetables and some moderate FODMAP vegetables, looking at things like carrot, red capsicums, and green beans, and altering the shallots to be half of a bunch of spring onion using that green top only. When it comes to modifying our baking or our sweet recipes, I really believe that this is a little bit easier than our savoury recipes. So again, I'll get you to have a look at this high FODMAP vanilla cake and the buttercream that's used with it as well, and see if you can identify any high FODMAP ingredients that might need to be swapped for a low FODMAP alternative. If you're needing a little bit of extra time, pause the video here. After scanning the recipe, you might have picked up on high FODMAP ingredients, including the all-purpose wheat flour and the buttermilk or whole milk. Now, you might be surprised to know that other dairy products like butter, because of their high fat content, are relatively low in carbohydrate, making them a low FODMAP dairy option. To modify this cake and make it low FODMAP, all we need to do is swap the regular all-purpose flour for gluten-free flour and swap the buttermilk or whole milk to soy milk made from soy protein. You could alternatively use something like almond milk or lactose-free cow's milk as well. Now, because that recipe was quite easy to go through and make some alterations, I thought I would throw one in that's a little bit more challenging, looking at these lemon, coconut, cashew date balls. And this might already be ringing alarm bells for you, but what I'll do is give you a moment to have a look through and see if you can identify the high FODMAP ingredients. If you're needing a moment longer, pause the video here. After scanning the recipe, you might see that it has cashews and in fact it has pitted dates as well. Two extremely high FODMAP ingredients. So to make this a low FODMAP recipe, you'll simply swap the cashews for walnuts, and you'll swap the pitted dates for dried cranberries. Now, dried cranberries can become high FODMAP beyond a 2 tablespoon serve, but because this is a recipe that will serve 12 or so, swapping for cranberries is a suitable option. But what if you're cooking for your family or friends and you don't want them to miss out on ingredients like onion and garlic? Now, there is actually a way around this, so you can add in these real flavor boosters as well as prebiotic fibers for your friends and family that are not needing to follow a low FODMAP diet. My best advice is actually to cook your high FODMAP ingredients separately and serve them through at the end of cooking after removing your low FODMAP serve. The alternative is that you cook your meal in a really large pot or a pan, and you try and keep the high FODMAP or moderate FODMAP ingredients to one side. Now, this is potentially a risky strategy if you are in the elimination phase of the low FODMAP diet and you're adding onion to one side of the pan. Because of the nature of FODMAPs, they are water soluble, which means that they can be absorbed into the broth or the fluid that could be in the pan, and then that's at risk of contributing to uncomfortable symptoms. And finally, I wanted to touch on how you can add flavor to some of your favorite recipes as well. It's too common that we rely on things like onion and garlic and their powders as well to boost the flavor, that we can forget about all of our low FODMAP flavor boosters that can really add such depth and character to our meals. So instead of just using onion, garlic, leeks, spring onions, and honey, try swapping for some low FODMAP flavor boosters, things like infused olive oils, onion and garlic replacers, ancient herbs like asafoetida or hing, chives, using the green part of spring onions or leeks, using seeded mustard, fresh or dried herbs, lemon or lime juice, balsamic vinegars, oyster sauce, fish sauce, soy sauce, and maple syrup. Thank you so much for tuning in to my lesson today on how to modify your favorite recipes to make them low FODMAP and how to add flavor to your low FODMAP cooking as well. If you're someone that's struggling with uncomfortable gut symptoms, or you've been diagnosed with IBS by your GP, your primary doctor, or your gastroenterologist, then I would love to invite you to reach out for extra support from an IBS dietitian. You're more than welcome to get in contact for one-to-one virtual appointments. It doesn't matter where you are in Australia or in the world. And for those in Australia, rebates are available via health insurance and Medicare as well. The very best place for you to touch base with me is over on my Instagram, which is at IBS_dietitian, and my website is www.dietitianchelsea.com.